A very warm welcome to the Vibrant Music Teacher Chat. This is the show for you if you're a teacher who wants to hang out with teachers, who wants to talk shop, who wants to get some inspiration and hear the latest news and details about what's going on in our teaching community. I'm thrilled to have you here, and if we haven't met yet, my name is Nicola Canton, and it's lovely to meet you. I run a site called Vibrant Music Teaching and also a blog and this YouTube channel where I share tips and tutorials and ideas for music teachers just like you. So you're in the right place. If you are new here, please do chime in and let us know how you're doing. Say hi to us. We do not bite here. We are the most friendly group of teachers around. So please do write in the chat. Let us know your thoughts as we work through today's show. The special topic today is about finding your life balance. But as I mentioned, we also go through the latest news and goings on in the music teaching industry in this show. And we do 2 website reviews so that you can learn about marketing yourself better online in our current online state of things and moving forward into the future. So let's dive into some news. Okay, I'll start with my update. Things are still a little bit quiet around the teaching sphere, but I've been back in full work mode, or sort of gearing myself up. There's the holiday chugga, right? Where you have to get back to reality and back to normal life and back up and running. So that's what I've been doing. It's been my first week back teaching. Let me know if it was yours. Was it your first week back, or are you one of the very lucky people down in Australia and New Zealand, perhaps, that is still on summer holidays, or maybe over in Argentina and you're still on summer holidays. So this was the first week back, and it always makes me think of this song. I was thinking this earlier because it came into my head all throughout last week. It's just that 80s song. I don't even know who this is or what it is, but it goes back to life, back to reality. What's that song? Someone can let me know in the comments. But yeah, that runs through my head always the first week back of teaching. And it was running through my head definitely all last week. The words often change in my head to back to teaching, which doesn't fit. But anyway. So that's what I've been up to, but I've also been doing a lot of VMT stuff as well. So I've been getting ready for the Inbox Zen Challenge, which starts today, and already going great, already really challenging people, which I love, with our first challenge today. So if you are part of the challenge, if you already signed up but you haven't checked it, hop on over to the Facebook group to check it out, or check your email for the email from me to sort out your email. Meta a little bit. Okay. Then the other thing I've been doing, apart from preparing for that Inbox Zen challenge and getting started on the kickoff call, I have been putting together some new job opportunities that we have going at VMT. So I wanted to let you guys know about that. You can get to it at colourfookies.ie/jobs if you're curious what we have available, or if you're on the email list, you will have got an email from it about it last week. We have 3 positions open, and I went into more detail on these in a separate video on Facebook, so you can check that out. But just briefly, we have an opening for a design assistant. So someone who knows Adobe Illustrator, that's what that means mostly, and is also a teacher. We ideally like everyone to be teachers on our team, or most of our team to be teachers. An editorial assistant, which means someone who loves writing and grammar, and particularly storytelling for this role. And then a web assistant, which is someone who loves technical things and putting things in their right boxes and checking all the things off, because it's all about website updates and that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in any of those, you can check them out at colourfookies.ie/jobs. There's a few more days to apply there, and I'm really looking forward to welcoming some new people onto the team. All of our recent hires, in fact, for the past almost 2 years, have been teachers from our wider community, the membership, or people from the email list and things like that, people who follow the blog. And it is so wonderful to have people like that on the team. We have some specialists who are broader than that, who aren't music teachers, but it's just extra special when we get to have someone from the community join the team, join Team BMT and come behind the scenes, and I love it. So if you're interested or you know somebody who might be, do send them our way. Then the other big thing I was putting together last week was the member survey. So if you're a Vibrant Music Teaching member and you haven't filled that out yet, you can be in with the shot to win some swag, and you're also helping to improve the site. So definitely check out the email on that. And just briefly, I'm going to have more on this for members later, but if you were one of the people who commented about the search on the site and improving that, please note that I'm already doing it. So we take action straight away when we get feedback like that. It's already a lot better on desktop. I'm working on improving it further on mobile, and I will let you guys know when it's new and refreshed, but know that it's already a lot better based on the feedback we got. So thank you so much for giving us that feedback, because that's what helps us make the site better. And if you're not a member, you can join us at vibrantmusicteaching.com. What else was I doing? It was my first week back teaching, so everything kind of went by in a blur. I started off the week, let me know if you resonate with this, I started off the week being like, oh yeah, I can, and then 2 days in, I'm like, oh wow, okay, let's get through the week. Not get through the week, I still enjoyed seeing all my students again, but yeah. That first week back is always has some extra sparkle needed to get through it, I think. And being back online after being offline for a couple of weeks before Christmas as well. So full lockdown here in Ireland, so we're all fully online again. And then last thing I started doing last week, which was quite fun. And you guys can let me know. I'd love to open this up to the brain trust. I have a bit of an idea, but I was trying to come up with something fun for the 150th episode of the podcast. I could not believe when I saw that number. Like, I knew I did episode 100 last year, but still, I wasn't expecting it. So, Stephanie, isn't that the truth, right? Always mentally draining, always tough. But it gets easier and we get back into the swing of things, don't we? But yeah, the 150th episode of the podcast is going to be coming up. It's not for a couple of months, but I was starting to brainstorm and think ahead to it, and coming up with some fun stuff for that. So that's the other thing I was on last week. In terms of stuff that we've released into the world, though, there's a lot going on. So while a lot of the teacher blogosphere, as it were, and podcastosphere, that's not a thing, was quite quiet last week, we have been publishing quite a lot of stuff. So we have just released our newest course inside Vibrant Music Teaching. It is called Power Up Your Piano Teacher Productivity, or there's a post by the same name and a course that's Productivity Power Up. Anyway, they're both aligned together, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what members think of that. It's like taking the approach of Inbox Zen and expanding it into all different other areas. So it's going to be really special to see people working through that. We also had a new podcast episode just today called Doing All the Things. Did anyone resonate with that statement? Do you ever try to do all the things in your studio? I wrote that post for you and recorded the episode of the podcast for you. So you can check that out on the blog. But we had a great post. I shouldn't say but. Not that my article's not good, but even better was our recent guest post. We had a guest post just a couple of days ago from Gemma Wilkins, who's our community assistant. She is awesome. She's like a rock star teacher and mum over in Australia. And she published a post which I just think is going to be so beneficial. It's about going back to teaching after maternity leave and how to handle that and how to keep your productivity up during that time. So I'm not a mum, she is. It's from her perspective, and I think those tips are going to be really, really valuable. It's also beautifully written. So huge shout out to Gemma and thank you for that one. That's also over on the blog. And then one recommendation from someone else's side. It isn't all about us, normally, this segment, but just right now it is, which is the Beyond Measure podcast. It's a fairly new podcast. I don't know if you guys will be familiar with it yet, but if you haven't checked it out, do. Not for a new podcast, just for any podcast. She's doing fantastic, Christina. So it's a really beautiful show. And her most recent episode, or one of her recent episodes, was about setting an intention for each student. You know how you'll set an intention, set a word for your year, like balance, for example? Well, she sets them for each student. And I just thought it was such an interesting approach to planning or resolutions or whatever you want to call it for students. So I definitely recommend listening to that episode. That was really interesting to me. Yeah, we have a fan. Yeah, absolutely. It's great. And she's only a few episodes in, which is why I said for a new podcast. But it's not for a new podcast. It's just in general great. I'm just surprised at how fast she got so great. Definitely highly recommend that show. And then, yeah, that's it for our news, because a lot of other sites are quite quiet. So let's go into some sneak peeks. Right. We have next week on the podcast, we have a post about outsourcing. And before all of you tune out and say, I'm not going to hire anyone else in my studio, I cannot possibly afford it, I want you to keep an open mind when that comes out, because I think you can. And when you see the approach that I take, I think you'll see that it is doable, even for someone running a small studio, even for someone with not that many students, not a huge budget. You can hire out small tasks, and it does make an enormous difference. So that's going to be about hiring out your studio admin, and yeah, you'll see that next Monday. Then next week on the show, right here, we're having a discussion about managing admin more generally, not just hiring it out and hiring other people to do it, but how do you manage it in general? So that's going to be, we keep it fun no matter what, right? It's not going to be boring. We'll keep it jazzy and interesting, even though it's about admin, I promise. And then a little bit further ahead of a sneak peek, next month, we're going to have our first workshop of the year. And this year we're calling them masterminds, and they're extra special. And it's going to be about working with adult students. It's called From Teacher to Coach, how to work with adult students. And I just wanted to give you a heads up about it ahead of time for everyone, but especially for members, because we're going to have the masterclass itself, and then we're going to have a follow-up coaching call between us to really put everything into place. So that's our first one in that format. Really excited to put that into practice and really help you implement more of what you're learning in the workshop. Yes, you could, Corey. Not that you have to. I'm only asking for an open mind as you go into that discussion and that thought process. I'm not talking about teaching, by the way. This is about admin, the outsourcing episode. So definitely check it out, see if it might be of interest. I'm not here to push anything on anyone. I'm just here to open up possibilities. So those are 3 really fun things that are coming up soon. Now let's dive into the main topic for today. So as I asked at the start, I want you to tell me about a time when your life was off balance. Off balance. We had some great comments already about being off balance. Let me see. Charlotte said, I find September and January to be my out of balance month. It's great to know that kind of stuff about yourself. I think I overdo the planning, for sure. And Kelly, like me, right after a break, that's when it seems like we're short on time and it's really tough to balance everything and make it all fit in. And then Stephanie said, moving from holiday rep and decor leaves me feeling out of balance. So those are three very different approaches to what balance means. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about here today, is there's a reason I called this life balance, not work-life balance. The idea of work-life balance to me sounds like you have literally a balancing scales like this, and you have work over here and life over here, and you keep trying to put everything in one of these bowls. And the problem with trying to do that when you don't go to a separate office, when you're not an employee, when you have a home studio and you keep odd hours like we do, is it's messy. There are marbles that fit kind of in one bowl and kind of in another bowl, and it doesn't work to try to separate them completely. So I prefer the idea of life balance. It's about balancing everything in your life, and that includes some things which we might classify as work, and some which might be classified as kind of half work, and some which are truly just life, right? They're just truly outside of the workspace, like walking in the park. But all of these things really mix together for us, and that's why I like seeing it as a life balance. We're balancing all of these different things, not just two separate, distinct elements. Our lives are completely intermingled. So a good example of this is recently a member asked in the Facebook group. She asked about balancing different things when Facebook is so mixed up specifically. So she was asking, does it count as me still shutting off for the evening if I go into Facebook on my phone at night? Because I want to go into Facebook to chat with my friends and stuff, but I also have all these piano teaching posts in there. So that's a great example of this. Now, there is one option, which is you can separate that off into a separate Facebook groups tab. So if you unfollow the groups, they'll be only under groups and you can not check them. But my question really is, does that feel unbalanced to you? For some people, it will stress them out. They'll see the piano teaching ideas in their feed and they'll be distracted by them and they'll be thinking about their students, and it'll be really tough to keep that sense of balance if they do that. And so separating that area is great. But for some people, they want to catch up with their colleagues. They see that as more chat. They know it's just social. They're not trying to absorb all these ideas and put them in boxes in their head. And so it doesn't bother them. And I don't think we need to put any guilt on those people to say, no, you must separate out your work and your home life and your friends and your family. If you're not hurting yourself or anyone else, then that's fine. Maybe you want them mixed together. What is something right now that feels unbalanced for you? Let me know. What's an area that you find is out of kilter? It can happen in lots of different areas, and it's always going to be something that we rebalance over time. I want to give us 3 approaches today to consider every time one area does feel out of balance. Yeah, Gary had a great example there. Late night messages from students can foul my sleep if I don't take care of them before bed. Yes, maybe you shouldn't check them in at night at all, Gary. Maybe you should find a way to get those out of your phone at all, because you don't necessarily want to be answering them, but maybe you do. That's my point here, is if that feels okay to you, if that feels like you've struck a good balance, that's fine. Yeah? Okay, here's my 3 different approaches. Approach number 1 is to cut. Sometimes we just need to cut something completely out of our life in order to maybe reintroduce it later and find the balance again. I think of these 3 approaches, by the way, in terms of diets and food. I think that's a good analogy for this. So sometimes you think you're intolerant to dairy. Me, I'm lactose intolerant. So you think you are. So the only way to discover it, I mean, you can get a test for that, but for most things, the only way to discover it is you cut it completely from your life. And then, after it's out of your system, you try it again. And if you immediately get an upset stomach, well, it was the dairy's fault. But until you've cut it out, you can't find that out. So sometimes we need to take that kind of approach. For example, makeup lessons. Maybe you need to cut them out completely. And maybe they'll stay out forever, please. But there are areas like that where you need to cut it completely, and it might not be something as concrete as makeup or as big as makeup lessons. It might be answering emails in bed. Maybe you need to cut that for a while. See if your sleep gets better, but it's going to have to be cut out completely for a long time before you really see the benefit, or whether that was a big factor for you, whether it matters, or whether you miss the emails in bed and you just want to read them, okay? Right? So that's approach number 1, is you cut it. You just cut it out. Let me know something that you think maybe you should cut for now. News on TV. Do you want to cut that completely, Karen? Maybe. I don't know the last time I watched news on TV. I stay up to date, but not on TV. I don't watch news ever. The only thing I'll watch is like a government address or something. So, maybe the approach is to cut it. Maybe, though, you just need to count it. Maybe you need to become aware of it. This is, in the dieting analogy, it's like counting calories, right? That has negative connotations, but sometimes it is the best solution for someone, because all they need to do is become aware of the calories in different foods so that they can recalibrate themselves. It's not about obsessing over them forever. It's about realizing how calorie dense something is, butter or whatever. And so maybe the area of your life that feels unbalanced, it just needs to be counted. It needs to be measured so that you can look at it and say, is this good? Is this bad? Am I happy with it? Do I want to adjust it? A good example of this might be lesson planning hours. Maybe you feel like, I feel like I'm lesson planning all the time. Well, count it. Count the time you're spending. By counting it, you'll probably end up reducing it anyway, because you'll cut out a lot of the lesson planning where we're pseudo lesson planning and we're actually just browsing the internet and distracting ourselves, right? Wasting time, let's just say. And so you might end up reducing it naturally by counting it. But even if you don't, you can look at that and say, is that reasonable? Is it not? What is that per student? Until you do that, you don't know whether it's too much or too little or feels right. Another thing you might like to count is your time on social media. Speaking of Facebook, maybe you want to install a tracker app on your phone that just counts it. And you'll see how many hours, I would dread to see mine, how many hours you're spending on Facebook every week, or Instagram if that's your time killer, or Pinterest if that's the problem for you, or your email inbox if you open it on your phone too much, right? And then once you've counted it, you can start to adjust things. So maybe counting is the best recipe for you. Or maybe it's a case of moderation. Moderation is a tough one because sometimes it can feel a bit holier than thou. It can feel a bit, oh, well, you just everything in moderation. And it's like these people are just angels who magically, oh, well, or saints is what I mean. Everything in moderation. I just control it. But in some cases that is true. It's not that far off balance. All we need to do is be a bit aware of it and acknowledge it to ourselves. Maybe put a little reminder, like a little post-it note up, and that'll be enough. Maybe we don't need a major adjustment to make it make sense again. So tell me your current thing you need to adjust, and tell me which one of those three it is for you right now. Which one do you think would be the best approach? Corey, that's an interesting question. Lesson planning is planning your lessons. That's so unhelpful. How that takes over your life? Because they're thinking about what they should do with each student all the time, and they're considering all the different options. What people put in that bucket a lot of the time, Corey, is reading blog articles, reading magazines, looking up ideas on Pinterest, downloading games, right? They consider all of that lesson planning. A lot of people would. So maybe you put that in a separate bucket. Okay, lots of different votes coming in. Elizabeth says, cut. I've already discovered some subscriptions I can get rid of in email. That's great, Elizabeth. Yeah, you see, this is why, because I love that there's so many responses coming in so many different areas, right? It's not all teaching stuff, it's not all business stuff, it's your whole life, right? Some of us need to adjust our TV habits. Some of us need to adjust our actual diet. Right? It's not just a metaphor or an analogy. It's actually what we need to do. And that's the biggest thing that's off balance in our life. And so that should get our priority. And some of us it is a business thing, and some of us it's a teaching thing, right? It can be anything. Nice. Okay, any follow-up questions, let me know, guys. That's my 3-step idea. 3 different ways to consider this. But I want to put in a little footnote here. To make all that work, to cut it, to count it, to moderate it, to find balance again, there's something really important you need to do. And that comes back to what Corey was talking about there. You need to ditch the FOMO. You need to ditch the fear of missing out or the need to collect all these different ideas. You need to ditch them all, because if you're trying to do everything, if you're trying to collect everything for later, that is going to consume all your time, and that's what you're going to count maybe as lesson planning, but it's not really lesson planning because you're not going to use it with your students, at least not for a long time. So I want you to keep something in mind. This is a bit of a funny story, but I'm going to take you back in time to a time when I was hanging out with my friend. And no, I think I was 18 at the time. And I suddenly had this revelation. You can infer what might have been going on. Let's say we were a bit under the weather. And I had this revelation that money flows. This is what I was obsessed by. And I kept saying it to her over and over again. So it's like this running joke between us. Money flows, money flows, money flows. So what I want you to consider in the present day is not money flows. My 18-year-old self wasn't that wise. But it's that ideas flow. Because they do. Honestly, if you have an idea from a blog or somewhere else that you think, oh, I have to save this because this might be great someday. Oh, I love this idea. I can't use it right now. But I know I'm going to want it someday, so I'm going to save it. Remember that it'll flow back to you if you want it. You're not stuck for ideas, are you? Do you find yourself scrabbling? Because if you do, you can post in Facebook or in our VMT community, and you'll get tons of ideas back anyway when you are stuck. But most of the time, we're not stuck. We're overloaded. So don't have that FOMO, right? Yeah. Fear of missing out. I did unabbreviate it a second ago. Yeah. We don't need it. Ideas are going to flow back to us. And remember our little mantra. What is it, guys? I made something special for you this week, especially for this. The way to avoid the FOMO, the way to avoid the collecting of underpants, is to just do one thing. Just one. Just do one thing at a time. Make one step. Take the best idea that you see that's actually relevant for you right now, and J-Dot. Just do one thing. And you can come back for the others later. They'll flow back to you. Don't worry about those. Just do one thing. And then you can rebalance things over time. Alright, we're going to go into our web reviews. So we will switch over to the screen. In the meantime, let me know if you have any questions, and we'll have our Ask Me Anything session at the end with any follow-up questions that you guys have. And, oh, there we go. Right, everything's working. Okay, this is our first site we're looking at today. This is the website of Colleen. And when we arrive here, I love that I immediately see Colleen right here doing a Zoom lesson and having fun, right? Do you see the little wacko erasers? I actually love that this is like that. It's not quite in focus. It's kind of fun that way, and I think it's great. Due to the current situation with COVID-19, only online lessons are taking place, but you immediately see this positive view of what that means. It means, yeah, we're on Zoom, but we're having fun and playing, right? And then she has some great resources about how to do that so that it seems accessible as well. And some lovely photos of her with her students at previous recitals, which is just fantastic. Now, the only thing here, Colleen, which we won't see on the screen, is at the very top of the site. So this is, I think, on my music staff one. If it is possible for you to get the plain URL, so I can't remember the website as it stands now, but for example, ColleenBranson.com, not .mymusicstaff. Oh yeah, it's ColleenBransonPiano.mymusicstaff.com at the moment. So just ColleenBransonPiano.com. If you can set that up within My Music Staff, I would recommend it. The other thing would be great to change is the little logo that comes up in the corner. I know it sounds silly, but these things sort of add up to a more professional appearance. I also don't love this colourful keyboard. I think it's a bit distracting, and I think you should just allow your wonderful photos of you and your students to shine. So I would cut that. You don't have to have a logo. So if that's why it's there because you feel like you need to have a logo of some sort, you don't. Just leave it plain. Just have a title. You don't have to have a logo at all. And if you do have one, it should be very simple, probably just one color, simple icon, but you don't have to have one. It doesn't add a huge amount. That URL would be a bigger impact, in my opinion. So, studio policies. There's quite a lot in the menu as well, so I would consider trimming that down if you can. Studio sharing I found hard to follow. You mean you're sharing examples and stuff? Oh, it's the blog, really. I would just call it a blog. Just keep it simple. People usually know what a blog is. And I would probably put that on the right as well. And then, yeah, just in general, trimming down the menu would be my next priority, Colleen. So making all of these titles shorter, really thinking about what a parent would want to click on. So I don't need to, I would assume it's 2020 to 2021 without you telling me. So if you just put calendar, I'll assume it's the current one. If you just put policies, I'll assume they're current. Blog, registration, don't need to say student there. About the studio or something like that. Useful info, maybe. Practicing, I'm not sure about that. I would maybe combine these and that into one item. So these could be sub menu items of this one. So about the studio, and then under you have useful links, practice info, something like that. And then same, that could go under there too. Okay, Colleen, so I hope that's helpful. That gives you something to get your teeth stuck into. Well done for setting it up and getting it up and running. Our second website today is from Lee Jenkins. So this one, when we arrive here, I like that the menu is simple. It's almost like the opposite of the other one in some ways, the things I'm seeing. So that's really interesting. So Lee, I like the simple menu structure. That's great. And I like the overall layout. What I don't love is this image. So with Colleen that we saw a lot of photos of her and her students, whereas this is a stock image. And so if you have a picture of you and your students, that you can make bigger and put up there so we can see real stuff happening, because you clearly have some photos here. And then I'd put that there instead. It'll showcase way more of the personality and look more real. We're local businesses, right? We don't have to look like polished corporate entities. Then we got some simple links here. Nice. Testimonials down the bottom. If you can add in images to those, I would recommend that. And then meet the teacher. Good call to action there. Didn't see that on the home page, did I? No, I would put that same call to action on the home page as well. Contact me for a free blah 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 blah. That should be on every page. And then the contact page. Perfect. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful, Lee. Mostly it would be about the images for me there and that call to action on the home page. Those would be the big improvements I'd love to see. Alright, diving into your questions. Let's see if there are some for us. Right, Laura. She said, please suggest an app for a spinner wheel. I'm doing the chord crash course with my students and I want to make a spinner to use for jump tests to make virtual lessons a little more sparkly. Love that, Laura. So if you want an app, as in an iPad or iPhone app, I can recommend Decide Now. Decide Now, all one word. Let's type that in for Laura. Now, if you are on a computer though, you don't need an app because there's a site. It's not the prettiest, but we use it and it works very well. Yes, Wheel of Names, that's the one I'm looking for. There's a couple that we use, but this one is quite handy and looks quite nice. So, I'll just add the link for you for that in there, and you can set up your own custom wheel there as well. I hope that's helpful. That's a fun thing to add. I love using spinners in my lessons. Any other questions about anything? Okay, just scrolling up to double check before I let you all go, but if I've answered all your questions, then we're doing well. That's what I call success. Okay, looks like it. Looks like we're successful. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It's a thrill, as always, to be with you. And I look forward to seeing you all back here next week. Before you get going, make sure to hit like on the video. Come join me over on Instagram or hang out with us in the Facebook group. And I will see you back here next week. Bye for now, guys.